Welcome, everybody. My name is Nabil, and I'm a director here at Terminal. I have the pleasure of introducing today's moderator and MC. But before I do, I wanted to mention a few things for the benefit of our live stream audience. If you have any questions for today's speakers, please put them in the chat box widget on our live stream page at terminal.io/livestream. And we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. For those of you who are not familiar with Terminal, we're a remote teams company where top engineers meet fast-growing companies, and because we bring global opportunities to global talent. We believe that talent is universally distributed, but opportunity is not. So if you'd like to learn more about job opportunities at Terminal, just head over to terminal.io/openings, where hiring is always on. With that said, I don't want to waste any more time in getting directly into the program. Today's topic is about building big products in international markets, and we're absolutely thrilled to have Rafael Prado joining us today, as well as Ben Apple. Ben is one of my colleagues here at Terminal, and he's a senior product manager. I'll turn it over to Ben now, who will be our moderator and MC, and he'll describe his background and introduce our special guest speaker today. Over to you, Ben.
Thanks, Nabil. Hey, everyone. Like Nabil mentioned, I'm a member of the product team here at Terminal. I've worked on product at tiny Y Combinator startups and larger growth-oriented companies like Honey. I was lucky enough to co-found a company, raise venture capital, sell that company to Goldman Sachs. So I've sort of experienced the full startup life cycle firsthand. Our guest this evening is Rafael Prado. I'm going to let him introduce himself and some of his experiences building software products, and then we're going to get into it. But just like Nabil mentioned, if you have any questions, we want to hear them. Participation is a good thing. So please submit those in the chat at terminal.io/livestream. Thanks. Rafael?
Hello, everyone. So it's a pleasure to be here in the Terminal community. I'm Brazilian. I've been working with products for more than 10 years now. I built a big part of my career in Experian, one of the largest credit data bureau in the world. I had the opportunity to not only work in my home country, Brazil, but also I spent 2 years working in London, in the UK. And more recently, I joined Rappi, one of the most exciting companies in Latin America right now. So it's very good to be here with you today and be part of this talk.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction. Let's just get into it. So you're at Rappi right now. It's a rocket ship, raised over $1 billion in venture funding. Perhaps the fastest growing LATAM startup. The only other company I can think of that might be keeping up is Nubank in Brazil. But for those who haven't had the opportunity to work at a company going through that kind of growth, I'd love to hear what that's been like for you. What's your experience trying to navigate what I imagine is constant change while also staying focused on your own goals and KPIs?
Yeah, Ben, it has been very exciting. Rappi is a company that is growing a lot. For the ones that didn't have the opportunity to hear about Rappi before, we are a company that operates in the delivery apps industry. So we can make deliveries of food, supermarkets, any kind of products. So we have this ambition of being the super app that you can get anything that you want to, arrive at your home very easily using our app. So it's a business that is growing a lot. If you think about our reality in the pandemic and how maybe 1 year ago, maybe I didn't have too many contacts with, apps like this, but now it feels like our lives depends on that so much in order to, go through all this time. So at the same time, it's very challenging to be in this company at this time. It's super exciting to be part of the product team because we are actually, having to deal with real problems every day. We are operating in 9 different countries in Latin America. So it's, complex and challenges in the international level. And it's been good to be part of a team that is actually finding success. It's getting better and better, and delivering value to the clients. And so it feels really great. It's very dynamic, as you can imagine, and it's a very good environment for anyone from product.
And so obviously massive difference between Experian, who I would probably bucket in the same cultural category as maybe a company like PayPal, a bit older, maybe a bit more traditional, less startup oriented, perhaps less agile. Talk to me about the differences between working at Experian on a product team and working at Rappi on a product team.
Absolutely. I think considering like the difference of how long those companies are operating in the market. So Experian has 50 years, has built great products all over the decades, have billions of customers' data, etc. And Rappi, it just started 3-4 years ago. So the difference of age of the company, I think, impacts a lot in the way things are done in the product team. So I feel that usually in a startup, things will happen more faster. You need to move faster in order to find success. That is different from a more traditional company that you already have a kind of a market share. And what you need to build is actually, how do I protect this market share? How do I actually expand with new services, or how do I enter new markets? While in the startup, you're actually, having to make, different decisions, difficult decisions every day in order to continue succeeding. So it's super interesting and super dynamic. I think the difference of the speed between the two different scenarios is also very relevant. So I think this kind of, impacts how the products are done and the types of challenges we have in the daily life.
What's the difference between and maybe you were just starting to touch on this, but maybe how you think about risk when making product decisions? Experian is quite literally a company that collects and resells data to creditors who are making decisions about risk and whether or not to underwrite a borrower. But not so much necessarily around the actual company vertical, but really just when it comes to product decisions, where you make bets, how you hypothesize, how you set up experiments. I imagine there's a big difference in how quickly you can move between a hypothesis and launching a new feature at a company like Rappi as opposed to Experian.
Yeah, I think in both scenarios, I think something that it's very common is you have a clear, target, you have a clear goal, right? So as a product manager, you have a mission, and in order to deliver that mission, you have, your ideas and your vision about how to actually get to a certain point. That could be launching a new product, or it could be getting more clients. So I think in both experiences I had, I always had very clear idea of what the company was expecting from me. So that actually helps a lot, because even though they are very different industries, when you have this goal very clear, then obviously you can, using the tools of the product management, start actually finding the solution or finding the plan to get to the goal. So I think I spent almost 10 years in experience. So I lived on Word before the Agile methodology, and then obviously Experian moved to the Agile methodology. And comparing the Agile methodology between both companies, I think they are relatively similar, but naturally Rappi was born with this. So that there is an advantage in actually understanding well that it's important to test, to create prototypes, to engage with customers, to test. So there is definitely a kind of a difference in here, but what I found quite interesting is that once you have a very clear goal and objective, then you're going to use those tools to get you there. And you're going to count on the resources that the company offer you to actually, build a product, manage a product, or having an idea, finding out if this idea will actually be successful. So I think probably it would be very difficult to actually navigate in an environment that you don't have clear goals and a clear idea of what you are supposed to do in that company.
Do you think that that's indicative of company size or really just maybe experience that, because I think I've experienced that at larger companies where it is not necessarily clear what it is that's expected of you, right? And so maybe that's something that all, I don't want to say larger, but perhaps more mature companies struggle with. Do you think that that's true?
It's hard to say that all the big organizations have these types of problems. I found the way that the experience communicates goals and objectives were quite clear.
Okay, yeah.
As clear as I have in Rappi. So I don't, and I think that we need to consider that when the companies grow, they will increase or they will enhance the governance model, right? And it will become in a certain point it will become very important in a certain point to actually give clarity to people to where you're going. So maybe if you are like a company with 10 or 20 people, then you don't need to worry too much about it because it's almost very understandable for everyone. But if you are like 5,000 people, then you need to, have time and effort in communicating the goals and what you're trying to achieve in your strategic vision. So then everyone can go into the same direction. So actually, no, I don't feel a difference between the size of organizations relating with the goals or how to actually tell exactly what is expected from you.
Yeah, cool. I think I just misunderstood, but I think what you're saying makes sense. I think an interesting thing to get into is this idea that you're not, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not perfectly fluent in Spanish. That's right.
No, no, not.
And so let's talk about that because one of the biggest parts of working in product or being a product manager, or a product owner, or a product lead, or whatever title you want to use, is this idea that it's your job to communicate to stakeholders, oftentimes executives or even founders, what your goals are, what your plan to achieve those goals might be, and also provides input on strategy, status updates, things like that. But to distill that down, communication is sort of the key to doing your job, communicating well. If you're working at a company where the majority of people are speaking Spanish all day, and you're not necessarily fluent or perfectly comfortable in Spanish, especially when it comes to technical terms or technical conversations, what strategies do you use? What tools do you have in order to communicate when perhaps having a call like this is challenging?
Yeah, no, and that's a really good point because I never really thought about how communication was important. I started my career in Brazil, working in my native language, that is Portuguese. And obviously in the product team, you actually, you need to sell ideas. You need to be compelling on the things you believe is going to be good for the company. And big part of the work is actually convincing different teams and senior stakeholders that whatever you are thinking is the right path, to the company. So communication is key to that, right? And I remember many times I was in a very important meeting in Brazil, and then I was talking to the CEO or to the CFO, and choosing the right words and the right moment to say exactly what I meant in order to get something approved. And I never thought about how difficult would it be to do that in another language. So when I moved to London, I obviously already spoke English, but it's not your native language, sometimes it's hard to communicate the precise idea that you're trying to sell. You don't have the right wording or the right verb to actually express the right feeling or the right description. I remember quite a few times that I said something and people were like, "Oh no, but that's not exactly what this project is." And then I found out that I was just using the wrong verb that I thought would be the same idea. So very quickly, I realized that this communication element wouldn't be so strong working in another language. And I remember that I used to talk to other people that were also like non-native English speakers, and they used to say like, "I sound so junior when I'm actually in English that I would be in my native language." But obviously, people don't know, so they will just like judge based on what you're trying to communicate. So what I found out, and I started using as a kind of strategy, would be like, because I need to compensate a gap in communication, I will need to be more like simple. And I usually found simplicity in describing how the product works from the client or from the user perspective. Because the client or the user, they don't know anything about, how your systems work or your integrations or, how do you organize your product teams. The user are only like in an app or in a web page trying to do something, in the best intuitive way. So I kind of try to use that.
They don't care about implementation details. They just want the thing to work.
They don't care about, what is the API you are using or whatever the technology, if you're hosting the data in cloud. They don't have any of that, right? And this is actually why you exist. You exist for this guy, right? So what I found like a very useful tool in important meetings, I used to like prepare a couple of slides and try to describe exactly from the user perspective. Okay, we want perhaps to change this flow in our web page. Okay, so let's see how it works today. So I also try to start like, okay, this is how the journey looks like. If not like sharing exactly all the pages, but at least a kind of a flow that everyone could look at and say, okay, I know what Rafa is talking about because I know this flow, I know my product. Okay, so now he's talking about this. And I say, okay, so on this, right, the problem for the client is this, right? And based on a survey or based on internal data or based on an A/B test or whatever, we actually believe that doing this feature or, changing this thing or considering a new product would make sense. And then when you kind of position, all your communication strategy based on what happens to the client or to the user, everything goes more easily. And obviously, sometimes in the middle of the conversation, and obviously you mentioned that like the engineering part, the technical part is very heavy in the product universe. So sometimes I was, talking with the people from engineering, and obviously sometimes I got lost with technical terms or with, context that I didn't have. And then it was easy to say, okay, but how what you're saying is connected to, this journey from the user, or how does this impact? And also try to use this link back in the conversation helped me a lot. So this is one of the strategies I still keep like now working Rappi. The company is originally from Colombia, so Spanish is kind of our official language. So I still do that. I feel like, okay, like I'm gonna prepare kind of a couple of slides. I want to state exactly what is the problem and why do we believe this is the problem, and then try to always like, bring attention to this. I think this simplify the communication. It helps to, to be more understandable. And at the same time, like you also, when I started studying English or Spanish, I always had this idea of I need to speak as a native, and it's impossible. You're gonna have your accent. You're gonna say words that are incorrect, and And the most important thing is to be understandable. So in a certain point of time, I just like give up of speaking correctly. And I just say like, it's more important that people understand what I'm trying to communicate, even though if there's like grammar or pronunciation mistakes. And also being humble to, ask if I'm not understanding, I'm not following, like, sorry, like I'm not following. And it's interesting because I remember obviously I had colleagues or people in the team that are native speakers of the language. And sometimes I left a meeting and say, oh, like this part was not so clear, or like another person will say, yeah, for me too. So most of the time when you actually don't understand, it's not necessarily the language, but it might be that you don't have the context, or the person you're talking to is not being so clear. So it's important to have like this thinking that it's okay to ask, and it's okay to say like, sorry, I'm not following, or I don't know, I never heard this term before. Like, can you explain to me what this means? And that was kind of the way I manage.
I almost wonder if this might be a stretch, but I almost wonder if there's an advantage to learning product or product development, or honestly just any professional context, building skills, communicating and working with people who have a different native language, simply because you do have to learn other tools and other strategies to communicate concepts that are sometimes pretty intricate or nuanced. There's a lot of gray space, or there's a lot of discovery that needs to happen. And so, I think like sticking on this subject, the subject of communication, I would love to hear your thoughts on remote work, because considering all of the cross-functional collaboration that happens as a part of product development, do you personally believe that products can be done effectively without any time in person with your team?
Yes, I think I started in Rappi during the pandemic. So, and actually my team is in Colombia. The engineering from, the squads I support, they are spread like in different countries, Argentina, Mexico. So definitely it works. Definitely you can. It's interesting to see like how the pandemic changed that, because I remember back in Brazil before the pandemic, when we were working in Agile, there was this mindset that the entire squad should sit together. So I remember I was like sitting, on a big table with the designers and the devs. We were all like working together in the same physical space. And then we used to have lunch together and do things together. And I remember of hearing in different theories that this was super important to the agile methodology. And then the pandemic came, and here we are working from home remotely in different countries, and it's still working. So I definitely believe it can be done, but obviously I think we need to adjust to these different scenarios. So if you work physically in the same space, you end up talking to your colleagues or your team members, even if it's not about the work or if it's not an official meeting, right? So you see each other, you talk during the lunch or on the coffee break or something. And now that everyone is working from your own home, you don't have that anymore. You don't see those people. So if you don't make an effort of being in touch every day, you might like spend weeks without seeing someone from your team. So what I'm trying to do is actually to have like daily meetings with the teams, even if it's just like 15 minutes or 10 minutes, and having weekly team meetings with everyone from my team, and also doing in a very collaborative way. So it's very hard to be like in virtual meetings that you are the only one talking. So I always try to also like be very dynamic so we can all hear from each other. And yeah, so I think you need to kind of adapt to this scenario, because you're not gonna like see people in the office. It's not gonna be so easy to just go into somebody else's table and start speaking about something. So yeah, but definitely can be done. And I think this probably changed how we, understand the work maybe from our generation and the generation that will come, right? I hear people say that they would prefer to do like a kind of a mixed format of, spending some days working from home and going to the office when all of this passed. So I think there are like, advantages in working from home as well, and probably we should not like throw it away. So yeah.
I think you're right. I think it'll be interesting how that shakes out, though, because the benefit of not having to go into an office is that you can live anywhere. But if the expectation is that you go into the office 1 or 2 days a week, you still need to be within driving distance of an office. And so, it doesn't exactly open up the sort of doesn't break down the borders for where you can live depending on where you work as much. But I totally agree. I think most people are going to want to, at some point, spend a little bit more time. I also think it's role specific. I think a lot of people that I know who work in other departments, especially business development, often like more not trying to stereotype, but often people who are a bit more outgoing and extroverted want to spend time in an office. That's that's something that they're missing a lot, and so there's going to be a lot of a lot to shake out in the next couple of years. But I think largely I agree with you. Pivoting a little bit in the conversation, you've managed people in London, you've managed people that now work and live in Latin America. What's the difference? What have you noticed in maybe other people's management styles, but also the differences in how people receive feedback, or how they seek out feedback, or opportunities to learn? Just talk to me a little bit about the differences in management styles.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I moved to London, I was very worried about this, like, how it's going to be to provide feedback. Right? It's something that it's so difficult to do in your own language and culture, and you need to be very careful with, how you say it, with what you say it. And I was like, oh, how that work in a language that is not my native one. And what I found out was that actually, first, people are I didn't feel like such a big difference with the team. I think both teams in London and now in Rappi received me very well and welcoming. So that was, something really positive and good to experience. And what I found out, for example, in providing feedback, so even like in the product discussions, how the product discussions can be very, polemic and full of passion and people defending their vision. And what I found out was that actually you need to be like honest and transparent. If you try to like, oh, I'm just gonna, maybe do something because, this is kind of how the corporate works, and I'm not gonna be transparent, then people will realize that in 3 seconds. So I think what was important to me was like, regardless the communication skills, to always be like transparent and thinking that I think this is also comes to like the kind of the leadership style. So I think I always try to put myself as someone that, it's part of the team. I'm here to facilitate things, to remove blockers, to, show the vision, to communicate where we are going. And if something is not, good with the team, I'll bring it up just to, make sure that we're still continuing this path. And also I was very open to also receive feedback. So I asked for it, and I tried to create an atmosphere that people were comfortable to say it. So it was super interesting because I think in the end of the day, I didn't felt so different in terms of team management. I think in terms of the leadership styles, I noticed like some difference between what I had back in Brazil and what I found in London. I used to say that I feel more like the Brazilian style is more if you are a leader, you're more like a kind of a coach of a team. So if you think about like maybe a soccer team, you'll be in a position of a coach, observing things, and trying to change the policy or change the structure, or and not necessarily being super close to details. And when I was in London, I felt more like the leadership style was like being a captain of the team. So you're still playing with your team. You are like in the middle of the game, but obviously you are leading because you are, the captain, and you are respected and has experience, but you're also playing. So yeah, I think it might be like cultural thing, but it's interesting because I feel like now I try to combine what I found best from both experiences. So I value a lot to know the details and being able to discuss with the team about very specific things, because I do trust that the success usually are like in small things that you're not noticing. But at the same time, you also need to have a strategic view, because otherwise you might not know to where you go. And then if you don't know where you're going, it's difficult to prioritize and know where to put your energy and effort. So I try to combine what I saw the best from the two things I lived.
I've never had to design a product for multiple countries right off the bat. So, I'm personally, I don't know about the audience, but I'm personally curious about how much you have to lean on your design research resources and UX researchers when thinking about launching a feature that's going to immediately be seen, or perhaps not immediately, but shortly after rollout, be seen in 9 different countries, and how core to the discovery process and design process UX research is in your job today at Rappi.
It's very important, definitely. And I think there is a challenge of thinking about things that can be standardized and make sense to people in different countries. And that was also something that, like, living abroad made me realize how, for example, Facebook is the same, Instagram is the same, Uber is the same. Obviously, you might have some features or things that are like country level, but you have a kind of a core that makes sense, to maybe billions of people. So I think this is kind of the mindset that, and definitely the UX element and the research element is key. That is, what are the core things that like are common in all places? So let's try to build from this perspective. And then obviously you have like different legislation, you have different contexts in the countries. So you need to consider some level of customization, because for sure will be required. But you need to think like, I'm not going to build a product that is going to be completely different depending on the country, but I'm going to build something that it should like 90 or 85% be the same, and I have a space for 10 or 50% customization. And obviously, in order to understand what is exactly this 15% means, you need to engage with people from all those different countries. Obviously, because you are operating those countries, you have people from there that can help you with research, in finding data, or doing benchmarks. So you need to consider all of that. And sometimes you see like benchmarks from 3 or 4 different countries, and you realize, okay, there is a kind of a common line, so definitely I need to build here. And then they're like, those are the differences. But I also need to standardize those differences. So I'm going to build something that is flexible enough to deal with those different specific things from every country. Obviously, it's, it sounds super easy to say, but sometimes you come up with things that you need to do something because there is a new legislation in one country and you need to do it for tomorrow. So you need to kind of adapt your entire code for just that specific situation. But I think most of the time is like that. It's like, engaging with the different countries, making sure that you are hearing to different clients and users in those places. You are doing enough research, doing benchmarks, using your local teams to get feedbacks and to hear from them. I think usually in my career, I don't see myself as someone that, will come to the perfect idea and then implement right away. It's much more about like hearing a lot of different people and considering a lot of different elements and kind of putting everything together and make sure that you come back and you show and you iterate and you keep like doing this. So then when you're finally ready to develop something, you like have a high confidence that it will work. So yeah, so that's how it works for me.
Awesome. Thanks for getting into that. This kind of circles back to the topic about risk aversion. Would you say that there's a cultural difference in at least how you've experienced different people, different companies think about failure? I understand that's a broad question, but I think it's the concept of failure is pretty core to what product does, right? It's a bunch of experiments, sometimes based on data, sometimes based on instinct, hopefully a little bit of both.
Yeah, I would say that I think in my experience in big companies, it was more like sometimes your project would take like months or quarters to be fully completed. And you don't want to like spend 6 months of, a team doing something to realize that it was not the right shape or the right idea or the right path. So that makes you be more like risk averse and not, and not being so, not being so able to handle failures because, it's a real pain to invest money in a project that takes 6 months, 1 year, and then it doesn't go anywhere. And in comparison with, I think, startup mindset that you actually have a much higher speed and you do things much more quickly, then it's not that bad to think about something, implement in 2-3 days, and maybe find out that was not such a great idea because it was like 2 or 3 days and not maybe 6 months or a year. So I think there's definitely I think it's not so much about like the size of the company, but I think it's like the speed of how you can actually get feedback from the market. So if you can get feedback from the market quickly, then failure is not going to be such a big deal. But if you take a lot to get some feedback, then you need to be more careful with the decisions.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. All right, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit because you've been such a good sport so far. You've worked with a bunch of amazing people. You've worked at some great companies. I would love to know what you think makes a product leader stand out above the rest. What are the attributes of people that you've worked with that are fantastic? What are the attributes of people you've worked with that you wish you saw in more product leaders? What are the things that you wish more people learned or brought to the team? I'll leave it there.
I think for me, one of the more important leadership skills is to have ownership, right? So it doesn't matter if the problem relies on your team or on your product, but if there's something that you don't feel is right, you need to do something about it, right? So I think ownership is super key, and I think in product team specifically, it's super important. Like I feel like the product team is like the last resource that people in the company would go to like solve problem or change things or move the business forward. So if you don't have ownership, then nothing is gonna happen. So I think this is one of the elements that are super important. And I think how this actually reflects on good products. I think good products are the ones that you are proud of, right? And you are so excited that you show to your friends, you tell like your family, and when you build products, you're saying like, this is the best I can do, and I want to be proud of this work. I think you're probably in the right direction. But like, if you are the product manager and you are like just doing things, okay, like I just have to do this, but doesn't matter, or, I'm doing because I don't know, my boss is asking, or I think you're probably in trouble soon. So yeah, so I think you need to be proud of, and you need to have ownership. I think those are the key things.
And for you, how do you maintain consistency and wanting to continue learning? How do you I guess keep yourself accountable to not becoming stagnant in your product skill set? Because product isn't something that people teach in college. Often it's this sort of amalgamation of skills and instincts, and typically things you learn on the job, typically learned by failing, trying and not succeeding. But the idea of being able to keep up with that as technology changes and as processes change, and there is, just like a developer, especially like a front end developer, where technologies change several times a year, there is a requirement to sort of keep up and continue learning. How do you do that? Like, I have my own strategies, but I'm far more interested in yours.
Yeah, I also agree with you that you usually learn more by doing, and connecting with I think one of your first questions. It's so good to be in Rappi that it provides with a lot of opportunities to actually think about something that you didn't have to do before, or having the chance to improving something. So I think what probably helps you to like not be stagnated is also to be in an environment that is very dynamic. It's going to be continuously challenging you, and this is definitely one of the reasons why I am where I am. But I also find interesting to like be connected with technology as a user. So for example, I think one of the things that are like growing a lot, especially in the Brazilian market, I think it's all over the place. There are like the fintechs. So one of the things I do is like I create accounts with different fintechs, and my wife is very angry at me because like I now have like 5 different cards from different fintechs. But like I like to, for example, okay, like I want to know how is to go into the website and like realize like, okay, I can see the decisions that the person did here, and like, how was to click, and how was to download the app, and how was to go for the pages, and how was like the design. And I think this is super interesting. And this is one of the things I like to do, that is every time that there's like someone talking about a new business or something, or like I see an article on LinkedIn about, oh my God, this company just got 1 billion investment or something. I'm always super curious to know like, what are they doing? Like, and trying to experience it as a user. And eventually you'll learn from those experiences when you're actually doing your own decisions. And then you say, oh, like I saw that in that company, in that journey. So why don't we do that here? Like, oh, it sounds so difficult to do it, but I know that those guys solved this way. So we should not be afraid, because if it's working for them, it's probably going to work for us. So this is one of the things that I try to do. And I personally I found hard to actually find good articles or just doing things by reading. There's a lot of good stuff there available, but I usually found more hard to actually just learning by reading those types of articles. I'm usually very interested in like there is this company growing a lot or this very traditional company doing this move. I'm also interested to know like why are they doing this move? Like would I do this move if I was there? Would I do this? Like um and so that was typically the type of thinking and the things that I try to do. Obviously, there is I think there's also like a kind of a more formal way of learning. So I went to an MBA, like I also did all this kind of traditional way of learning, and I think that's probably helping things like management, being able to communicate with different teams. We are product like, so we need to talk to people from finance. We need to talk to people from compliance. So it's not just about development. So I think those formal ways of learning they also have contribution.
I love it.
Yeah, so that. So how do you do? Like, I'm curious about to hear from you. Like,
I do
dynamic a little bit.
Yeah, I do all the same things that you do. I'll share one secret thing that I haven't really ever told anyone, and now I'm telling however many people are listening to this, and you. But I like to apply to jobs at companies that I have no interest in working for, because most product interviews are case studies, and most of those case studies are based on problems that they're currently working through, and so it keeps your skill set pretty sharp if you can take on a case study in real time, read through the content, and then think through what is the user problem, how are we going to look for solutions, how does this align with the business's mission, what do the unit economics look like for this, how are we going to prioritize new features, how are we going to set up A/B testing. These are all the things that a lot of companies look for in their product interviews, and I'm not suggesting everyone goes out and wastes a lot of interviewers' time. That's not fun for anyone. But I think that every once in a while, if you want to interview for a company that you have absolutely no intention on working for, it's okay. You can learn a lot. You can also get better at interviewing, which is not a bad thing. But you can also just get better at thinking through essentially like a day in the life, but condensed into an hour. And also, like there's no pressure, right? You can think creatively. You can throw different ideas out that you might not otherwise. You can break down business models that perhaps you've never really had the time to think through, but you've always been curious about, and you can do so with other smart people. So that's that's my like mediocre life hack that I'm throwing out there. We actually have a question from the audience. Margaret from the live stream asks, if my professional experience developing software is closer with enterprise, meaning big projects, lower impact, larger or longer developing cycles, how could I set up my next learning adventures to help me land a startup product type of job? So sounds like what she's asking is, I work at a really big company. I would like to work in product at a startup. Do you have any suggestions on how to achieve that?
Usually I would say that every large, big company is probably in a kind of a path to also learn from this new way of working that the startups created, especially in the product, in the engineering areas. So I think the first thing was actually to try to identify if the company that you're working from has any like type of project or initiative in a more like digital transformation space. And then if that was the case, I would, try to do everything I can to be part of this. Because sometimes it's very good to learn in an environment that you already like have some familiarity with the business, but you're actually learning something new, but it's still inside the business. So I think this is one way. Another way, I think, there's a lot of new, like, I wouldn't say like teaching companies, but there's a lot of people trying to teach and qualify people in those new methodologies and help people to be able to work in those startups. So definitely like make some research in this area. Um, and also, I think it'd be, good to use your network to be in touch with people that maybe worked or is working in a startup and trying to like, hear and understand how it is and, how a person in that situation would be seeing, making this transition, what types of tips, uh, this network would be able to give you. I think probably those are the three things that come to my mind. Ben, anything comes to your mind about this?
Definitely. I would, I like what you said about finding projects at the company that you're already at, something around digital transformation. I think you could take that a step further. You could go, if your company has an M&A or a corporate development arm or a corporate development function at all, go talk to the folks who are running that, figure out what their priorities are, and start having conversations with them. You're going to understand how they think about researching an ecosystem. You're going to understand how they think about the conversation of build versus buy, meaning, if the head of product is talking with corp dev and they say, head of product says, I don't think we can build this thing for these reasons. It's not really in our wheelhouse, or we don't have the resources or the time to do it. Can you go find a company that already does this and acquire it, fold it in? So you can learn a lot about how startups at the end of the life cycle are brought into larger companies, which is kind of the reverse. But it's a good way to reverse engineer thinking about market opportunities. The other thing I would say is just go design a product. Go through the process as if you were starting a company, and you might find that you end up starting a company, which is great. But even just going through the motions of finding a problem that you want to solve, doing user research, right? Talking to people who might use your solution to that problem, designing hopefully some sort of prototype, and then putting that prototype in people's hands. If it's software, then that's great. If it's not software, you can still usually prototype something, and then for the most part, you've done a lot of the hardest parts of basically like idea validation or hypothesis validation at a startup. And so I think you'll have a much better idea, and you'll also be able to speak to those concepts pretty succinctly if you've got firsthand experience. So yeah, like go build a thing, go start a thing, go design a thing. It often helps if it's on a problem that you're passionate about, or at least like somewhat interested in. And then also talk to people in your company that think about startups all day long. Not every company has that sort of mindset, but usually there's a few people in every company that think about startups as these like little morsels of intense value where you can, they're highly leverageable. You can bring them in, you can multiply valuations. Not all of understanding startups is understanding how to build software in a startup or for a startup. A lot of it is understanding how startups function in the rest of the world. One example of this might be a really big company, perhaps the one you work at. Try to understand what the difference is between the revenue and the market cap, and then understand the difference between revenue and market cap at a startup. Right? You might find that there's these little pockets, these little opportunities to build intense value with a small team, and I think that's something that can be a sort of great way to start talking to people, get the conversation going, talk to stakeholders. Not everyone is interested in the implementation details of building software, but they're far more interested in the solutions that you can provide, the problems that you're solving, the value that's created by solving those problems. And so there's all kinds of different ways that you can start those conversations. Great question, though, Margaret. Appreciate it. Did you have anything else to add, Rafa?
No, I mean, I just, want to thank the opportunity of talking to you. I hope it was interesting from the people watching us.
Yeah, likewise.
No more topics.
Very much, very much appreciate your time. Appreciate your willingness to come on. And appreciate Nabil for setting this up and Terminal for hosting. But yeah, more than anything, very much am grateful that you were willing to talk with us and talk to the audience and give us your perspective on building products in LATAM versus building products in London for what a lot of people might call a more legacy-oriented company as opposed to the rocket ship that you're at now. I would say best of luck moving forward. I think, if you can hold on, who knows? It seems like there's no real limit for Rappi today. I don't know. $1 billion in venture funding, you don't have too many limitations, it seems.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Like, it's a very exciting company, and I think we have a great future ahead.
Awesome. Well, that's it for our time. I think we've exhausted the questions. We've learned a ton about developing products in different markets, and again, appreciate your time and grateful that you were able to join us. And thanks everyone who watched on the live stream. If you have any questions about future Tech Talks, you can always email the fantastic person who's in charge of that, Nabil@terminal.io. I just blew up his inbox. Hopefully he gets a lot of emails. But thank you for joining, and have a wonderful evening, everyone.